All right. This is the Chicago Computer Society uh, South Suburban chapter, and we are in the month of March 2025. This evening, we're going to start off with some Q&A. I want to mention I want to try and keep Q&A somewhat short because I have only two videos to show, but they're both lengthy. So the floor is open to any problems, questions, opinions, news that the rest of us may or may not know. Well, if everybody's going to talk at once, what the heck are we going to do? All right. Then if nobody's going to bring up anything, I'm going to see about what I can do. All right. Now, I want, yeah, get out of my way. Oh, you're going to be a pain. Now, for some reason, that don't want to work today. And I don't know what that was. All right. Now, a week ago at Sanford's TNT SIG, he broached a subject I brought up at the board meeting on the Saturday prior to his meeting. And that has to do with those still on Windows 10 that don't have any current plans as to what they're going to do. So he broached the subject and we talked about that for a little bit. I've got a video I want to play that I came across. I edited it some. It's a meeting I attended with another group, and I found it to be quite good. And so I'll share this one with you. Which, yeah, that's the one I want. Oh, wait, no, I don't want that one. I want this one. All right. You gotta be kidding. Okay, today's presentation, and I'd like to keep it as informal as possible. Now, wait a minute, you turkey. Now, come on. All right, now. And the person who's given this is, his name is Mike Unkerman, and Central Florida Computer Society. And he was into Linux with a Linux SIG a little before I started the Chicago one. And we worked together for quite a while before he finally felt there wasn't enough interest. He was satisfied where he was at in his knowledge and use of Linux as a full-time operating system. So, okay, today's presentation, and I'd like to keep it as informal as possible, so please raise your hand and either Huey or Drew, if you're monitoring that, just interrupt me if somebody's got their hand up and I don't see it. We're going to talk about options for continuing to use your Windows 10 PC after October 25. And this is actually part one of probably an 8-part series as to why I chose to put Linux on my brand new B-Link mini PC instead of Windows 10, 11, because I
had been using Linux before, but in coming to the decision, I had a lot of choices to make. And I realized that for many people, they probably have an old computer and they're thinking about a new computer, but they wonder if they really need to spend the money. And what would happen if they decided to continue to use this PC after October 2025, or do they have to go out and get a new one? I asked that question of Copilot and got a very nice outline that helped me put this presentation together. So we'll be looking at the options available for users of Windows 10 to start with, as Microsoft ends support on October 2025. It covers retaining Windows 10, upgrading to Windows 11, buying a new PC with Windows 11, choosing new hardware, Chromebook, or keeping your old hardware and switching to another operating system such as Linux. We'll take a look at the pros and cons of some of these options. First of all, what do you want to do if you want to continue with Windows 10 after October? So, do you think your computer is safe without getting updates? Do you feel that you've got a good firewall with the Windows 10 firewall or a third-party firewall? Do you feel you've got good antivirus, anti-malware, and do you have good personal support for not clicking on links that you probably shouldn't be clicking on anyway, that's going to put bad things on your computer that not having updates from Microsoft might cause some problems? And of course, are you making regular backups so that if something does happen to the computer, you can put an image back on and be back up and operating? So really, there's no essential security updates coming after October 2025, unless you pay for them. And there's no protection for the vulnerabilities that I just mentioned. Now, one of the options is to retain Windows 10 and get extended support. The support can come from Microsoft or a third party. So if you decide that you want to retain Windows 10 by purchasing extended support from Microsoft, we anticipate, I don't think Microsoft has formally announced it yet, that they will extend support with a license extension, the current license that you have, but you're going to have to sign up for it, of approximately $30 a year. As an incentive not to do this every year, they're going to increase the price. And I've heard some people say that we're looking at it doubling to 60 in the second and possibly getting higher. We don't really know when they're going to stop it completely, but it's expected to increase in the second and potentially a third or more years. You will get essential security updates and patches, and you will get continued protection from vulnerabilities like zero-day attacks. But you're not going to get newer features. So the Windows 10 23H2, I think it is, or maybe it's 22H2, whatever it is, the latest ones that are currently being downloaded, that's it come October. There'll be no significant updates, only security updates and patches. Now, there is at least one company, I think there's more that I recall, but in my research, there's a company called OPatch, and they're going to offer miniature patches that load up into RAM from their service. Each time you boot your computer, it will have to put microcode into the operation of Windows 10 to operate. And I'll take a quick look at that site. OPatch is the site, and they do this for corporations, but they are going to do it for just private users. So as I scroll down here past enterprises, well, where was it? It was just, how does it work? So you can get information on it. There is actually a free agent. And if you go to pricing, it doesn't cost anything for personal nonprofit education and testing use. But if you go and you look at what it's going to include, the only thing that you're going to get for free is a 0-day vulnerability attack. All these other patches are not included. So if you say, well, I want to pay for it, well, $24.95 is probably right around $25 to $30 US on a year basis. So for the first year, if you were doing this, and if they don't increase the price, it's the same as what Microsoft is offering, essentially, and probably more. But, and in subsequent years, especially if Microsoft kicks it up to $60 for the second year, now you're going to get these other patches. So it looks like they're forecasting it'll be Windows 10 version V2 H22 is going to be the final configuration. At least they think that. Steve, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think it's called Zero Patch, not O Patch. O Patch would be for Oracle.
Let's see. I'm looking up here at the top at the address. I don't see a cap. You probably are right. Zero patch. And that's the reason is because it says 0 days.
That's right, yeah.
Thank you. Yep. But you can see for the price, there's an extensive amount of patches, although we don't run the server software, but they're going to include server software. And apparently, if you're running Windows 7 still, and some people do, it's going to cover those. And I'm not quite sure how it ties in with Windows 10, but they're saying there's Windows 10 patches that they're going to be providing and perhaps updating that as well if you had Windows 10, which I don't know if their patches are better than Microsoft's or not. You'd have to figure that one out. But they also let you try it free. So that's one service. So choosing to stay on Windows 10 with extended support, whether it's Microsoft or a third party, is forecast to be only a temporary solution because eventually it'd be like Windows 7 is now. And I guess even Windows XP, I've got a version of that around here. I can still load it on a computer and make it work, but it's not really a safe environment to run in. So while you're getting this temporary support, you're relying on limited security updates when moving towards an inevitable transition to newer systems. And it's probably going to be a Windows 12 at some time or a Windows 11 something. So you really need a long-term strategy if you want to keep your hardware and if the hardware is still viable. So for most people, the answer might be upgrading to Windows 11. And for those whose PCs meet the system requirements that Microsoft publishes, then upgrading to Windows 11 is advisable. If you've got a computer that passes all the tests and you haven't upgraded to Windows 11, you definitely should consider it after October. Now, some may qualify for a free upgrade to Windows 11, and it depends on what version of Windows 10 license that you have now. Those with unsupported PCs face risk while trying to install Windows 11 with alternative methods, which I'll discuss. And the fees that I'm talking about, I think I've got it on the next slide here. I didn't do it. Okay. So what I'm talking about here is if you've got Windows 10 Home and you want to upgrade to Windows 11, you're going to get a Windows 11 Home for free. But if you really want to get Windows 11 Pro, you can get a license upgrade. And usually you get a dialog when you boot up into Windows 11. If you're in the home for the first time, they're saying if you want to, you can upgrade by going to the Microsoft Store and getting a license upgrade. So how do you know if your PC is compatible to get to Windows 11? Before upgrading thoroughly check your PC's hardware compatibility with Windows 11. So this includes criteria like the CPU type, the system RAM, storage requirements, graphics capabilities. Microsoft does have a built-in health check under the Windows Update and settings, and can provide an initial check and basically tell you if your computer qualifies to be upgraded to Windows 11 through the normal Microsoft. A third-party program, which I remember running some time ago and liking, it's called Why Not Win 11. It's a free and open source utility that can provide more information on one's computer and reasons why it might not be able to upgrade officially to Windows 11. I'll go back here and go to that. Let me see if I can. I've got a big black box here at the top of my screen, so I'm going to go ahead and hit a meeting control and hopefully hide that. Hang on just a moment. Control Alt Shift H. We'll see if that works. No, doesn't want to do it. All right, I'll just work around it. Okay, so why not, according to Bleeping Computer, why not Win 11 is a better replacement for Windows 11 PC Health Check? And as you can see, if you run it under Windows 10 or earlier, it will tell you if your boot type, in this case, is not qualifying, but if your CPU architecture does. And if the CPU generation, this particular check is a maybe. And then the number of cores, yeah, qualifies, the frequency qualifies, the Direct 10 support, which is graphics, qualifies. They don't like the disk partitioning for some reason. You got a good RAM. You do have, well, this one doesn't have secure boot enabled. And the TPM module meets the minimum requirements, whether it's software or hardware. I remember Bob G was telling us that he was able to get qualified with a software TPM modification and not actually put a chip, or get a new chip on his motherboard. So they're showing how to learn more about it, and okay, should have brought this up. So it's nice and large this time. So here, this one, they're saying they are detecting a TPM, so it would go well. Disk partitioning, not the fact that you've got multiple partitions, but you've got a basic partition instead of a GPT partition. So that's something a partition manager has to adjust, or the Windows 11 installation or upgrade program has to adjust for you. So this is a free program, and it's available from the link. If you just search on Why Not Win 11, it's from GitHub. Let's see if I can click on this and it takes me there. So they've got the changes. Looks like you can do some command line switches for it. System requirements. Well, I was wrong. It has to run under at least Windows 8. So it won't run under Windows 7. And they're giving you an example again. And here's what you would download. Or you can download the zip and then extract it from the zip. And if you got a 32-bit version, this, I know you're going to have 64-bit Windows, but if you have 32-bit, this utility will run under the 32-bit version of it. And by the way, when we send out the video, I will send out the presentation as well. So all of the notes and links and things will be in that. Let's get in here. And there's the link that I just went to. So free versus fee upgrades. So understanding the differences between free and paid upgrades is essential. Microsoft allows free upgrades for qualifying license, while other users may need to pay for the upgrade. And I'd said that on the previous slide, so I didn't get that in the right place. But again, you can pay Microsoft to upgrade to Windows 11 Pro at the time you do this, if you wish. Unsupported PCs. Yes, there are PCs that don't meet Microsoft requirements and can indeed be supported. You can use patches, which can be applied at the time of installation. You can use third-party tools, or you can make registry entries. And interestingly enough, in a Microsoft blog, answersmicrosoft.com, they actually provide instructions for patching the registry. Now, for just the average user, we really don't recommend mucking about in the registry, which can totally ruin your computer. Of course, you've made a full image backup, right? But if this is going to be a project for you and you actually want to see how Windows 11 looks on your computer, you've tested it, it's not qualified to get an update for Windows 11, and yeah, you want to go in the registry and do the patch, you can go to this blog and see what they have to say about it. Now I'm going to cover the next thing and then go to this site because it's got information on the next one as well. So there is a utility. Most of the people who run Linux are aware of this. It's called Rufus. And this is how many people who are running Linux actually create and install Linux on their computers, because it comes up with a bootable USB stick. And Rufus also will allow you to make a bootable USB drive that'll install Windows 11 with the original source coming from Microsoft, but it will patch it. And the information on doing that is at the Rufus website, but also information on the Microsoft blog in the conversation talks about the actual step-by-step procedures. First, to patch the computer if you wish to, and see if that works, or to use Rufus and create an installation disk that's going to put Windows 11 on your computer. So let's go look at that website. Actually, two websites. I have to move this down so I can see my tabs here. Okay. So this is the Microsoft site at answersmicrosoft.com. And I'm going to go up to the original sequence. And the question was asked, can I use this registry hack to upgrade Windows 11 with no TPM? And then they give a Major Geeks site with information that quotes this registry hack, how to bypass TPM and install Windows. And they say, open the registry editor, go to this particular key, change, put a new D word in, give it a name, and allow upgrades with the D word, and double click allowing it, set the value. Any changes that you make to the registry, then you would reboot the computer and then go through and try to do the update. And they're asking, does it work? Well, Microsoft says, I guess that's Joel, he says all requirements should be, as the article, should be met, but you need at least the TPM for the bypass trick to work. And someone else says no bypass method is for users that have TPM 1.2. So, but maybe not meeting some of the other requirements, the 2.0 requirements. So they're basically saying you can patch it, it may or may not work. And that's why I looked at the Rufus tool, which I'll look at next, and then I'll come back to the method. So let's go look at that Rufus tool. Oops. Get it down here. Where did you go? It popped in. It's moving things out. Okay. Here we go. Okay, this is what I wanted. So this is the Rufus site, and this is the screen that you might get if you booted up the Rufus program under Windows or Linux or Mac, actually. And it tells you what you're about to try to install, how to set it up, what BIOS you're choosing, what formatting you're doing. And this particular one is set up for Ubuntu. However, Here's the version for Windows 11. And these are all choices that you can do within Rufus. So you can say, I want Windows 11, and then there's a drop down and you can pick up which version that you want. And this is the edition, and you can be running from home and upgrading to Pro without paying Microsoft for it. I'm not advocating it, but it's a possibility with Rufus. And then you have a customization for the user experience. So this gets rid of some of the requirements that Microsoft has for installing Windows 11, removing the requirement for 4 gigabytes of RAM or plus of RAM, secure boot, and TPM 2.0. By checking that, the version of the USB drive is going to have the patches necessary for Windows 11 to install. Then have under Windows 11, it's my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm off on this, but the default installation is to have an online Microsoft account. And many people ask, if this is the only change you wanted, ask that you be installed with a local account and not require a Microsoft account. So Rufus will do that patch for you. And then privacy questions, disable data collection. This is just a brute force, disable all data collection that Microsoft might enter by default in the installation. And then once you've turned off the Microsoft account, this then lets you set up the local account using the same name as your user. And for some people that are in a country other than the United States and want to be in the United States with its version, you can actually set regional options as to where in the world you are when you're actually doing this. So there's a lot of capability to this utility, and it is free. Okay, now I got to get back to where I was. Come on. Sure what it's doing here. Oh, I see it. There we go. So after all of that, trying to go through and decide if you're going to stick with 10 or upgrade to 11 and do it the regular way or use patches or programs, maybe you've just decided that your computer is old, you've had it for a long time, and it's just time to break down and buy a new PC. So investing in a new PC that comes pre-installed with Windows 11 is going to ensure full compatibility and optimal performance. Manufacturers are creating hardware specifically designed to meet Windows 11's requirements, leading to a seamless user-on experience. This option is ideal for those wanting to leverage the latest features right from the onset without the need for upgrades or patches. New hardware brings several benefits, such as improved processing power, increased RAM. Lots of computers are coming out now, with a standard of 16 gigs minimum, and many are doing 32 or more. Enhanced graphic capabilities with standalone graphic cards or graphic chips, essential for smooth computing experiences. New PCs often incorporate the latest technology, resulting in faster boot times, better multitasking, and more efficient energy consumption. Additionally, they may come with extended warranties and support from manufacturers. With new computers designated for Windows 11, you can take full advantage of the operating system's capabilities. Features like direct storage for faster load time, automatic high-definition resolution for better visuals are supported on newer hardware, and higher-end PCs also can feature internal AI chips, and some are actually branded Copilot PCs. And then you're going to be getting regular updates from Microsoft to ensure that performance remains optimized, providing users with the best possible experience in productivity and entertainment. So what if you really want to downsize a little bit, simplify your life, minimize updates, and just get a device that is a computer, replaces your existing PC or notebook, and runs the Chrome operating system? And Huey and Ron and Tech for Senior and APCUG have had many presentations on Chromebooks. And I've had a couple myself. I know Huey's had several. And they are a definite alternative to a full PC. So they're known for their simplicity and speed. They're designed primarily about the web, but they do have a lot of offline capabilities that you can do without actually being connected to the web. The operating system itself is actually almost an instantaneous boot and efficient performance. You get automatic updates which enhance security and usability without requiring significant system resources, making it ideal for everyday tasks. The security on these is actually the operating system itself is contained in a writable, programmable read-only memory called EEPROM. And there's two of them. So when the system updates, it's been operating on the backup, it's been operating on the primary EEPROM while the update gets into the backup EEPROM when it happens. And then when you just say update or you restart the computer, it just switches and you're immediately updated. You don't have to go through a long update installation process. Chromebooks seamlessly integrate with Google services such as Drive, Docs, and Gmail, enabling users to work entirely in the cloud. This integration provides easy access to files and applications from various devices. Users benefit from collaboration features where multiple users can edit documents in real time, making it great for both personal and education use. And you don't have to give up your Microsoft Office applications if you're not a power user, because all of Office 365 is actually available on the web as an app that you can run on a Chromebook. Chromebooks are ideal for users focused on internet browsing, online productivity, and cloud computing. Students, educators, I'll put in seniors, professionals engaged in remote work. Due to their lightweight architecture, many of them are extremely lightweight, long battery life, perfect for casual users looking for an affordable yet functional device for tasks like email, video streaming, light productivity. Overall, Chromebooks are usually priced much lower than equivalent Windows-based notebooks. And if I didn't mess up my browser, I think I can go back to it. Let's see if we got it. Yep. So here's a search that I did on Amazon earlier today. And just the very first one came in under $200, a discount from $200 anyway. Here's an Asus Chromebook, 14 inches. It's got a Celeron processor, which is really all you really need in a Chromebook because you don't have to have ultra power. 64 gigabytes storage, and most of your storage is probably going to be on Google Drive, but you've got 64 gigabytes if you want to save things locally. 4 gigs of RAM, which is really, again, for basic unit, that's all you need, but there are Chromebooks that have higher for almost double the price. Here's one with 8 gigabytes and 128 gigs local storage. All of them come with Wi-Fi. Some will actually have an Ethernet connector if you want to connect it, or a dongle so that you can plug in for actual local hookup. But in general, just taking a look at what's there, most of them are well below what you would expect to pay for an equivalent capability PC notebook running Windows 11. My price point when I go shopping for a Windows 10 or 11 notebook is always start looking in the $500 range and see if I can find something on sale that's been reduced from $750 down to $500 or something like this. So Chromebooks put you in an entirely different arena in terms of cost, yet allowing you to be as productive or almost as productive as if you were with a Windows PC. My opinion. Okay, so what did I do? I went to Linux. Various distributions of Linux cater to different user needs, with accessibility, ease of use being paramount. Popular options include Linux Mint, known for its familiar interface and Ubuntu, which is designed for newcomers. Both offer extensive community support, making it easy for new users to transition from Windows to Linux while enjoying a wide range of applications. What I'm going to do is just quickly change my screen sharing. And I'm going to switch over and share my desktop that has Linux on it. And let's see if I can, well, I think you probably get a black bar at the top with these Linux, with these Zoom controls. But what you're looking at is, I've got two monitors. So this is my left-hand monitor. It's a 24-inch monitor. And this is, I'm running the B-Link mini PC that I bought last October. I backed up an image of how it came from the factory with Windows 11, wiped it out, did all the setup necessary, and I put Linux Mint on it. It looks and functions almost exactly like Windows does. I've got my Brave browser. I've got Edge if I want to run it. I've got Firefox if I want it. I've got an actual YouTube application. I'm going to get into it later on in my series on how I actually got it to run Quicken, which is a Windows-only program. I successfully managed to get Quicken to run under Linux now. It's got file folders. It's got links. Everything is pretty much set up. It's got a tray, which we call panel, which has got quick action functions that you can just start things. It's got a status bar down at the bottom. So the transition from Windows to Linux in terms of a user interface, double click on something and it runs, right click on it and get options. File managers, very similar to the file manager in Windows. Screenshots, which I like to bring up screenshots very much like Snippet is with under Windows. All kind, and I'm running Zoom right now with it, and running this presentation that I'm running with it. And we'll go back to that. Any questions at this point before I get into this a little more? Okay.
I got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
With the Linux Mint OS, can you log in and sync with OneDrive?
Yes, I have not. You're using a program called rsync, is that correct?
Not rsync, it's called rclone.
rclone, that's it.
Yes, and you can, with that software, it's free open source software, and you can mount your OneDrive folder. I do that on my computer with Linux, and you can access all your files.
And you also use your Google Drive on that too, don't you?
Yes, I do. I use
vCloud?
vCloud. I use about a half a dozen different cloud providers.
Okay. So what I just showed you is called Linux and Linux Mint, and it actually is distributed as its standalone distribution. I am using a more basic version of Linux Mint, which is called Linux Mint Debian Edition, because I investigated what its features were and I decided I wanted to go that route. But it's something that I did as a hobbyist more than what somebody might do that was just saying, I just want to convert. So when I did this investigation on Copilot, this is what they specifically said. This was most likely the most recommended would be Linux Mint, but there's others, and there's Fedora is got cutting edge software, and Debian, which I'm based on, emphasizes stability and reliability, which was more my interest. And when you go to a Windows version, it's pretty much, it's either home or pro. And yes, you can adjust the desktop the way you want and set backgrounds and some colors and all the rest of that. But it operates pretty much the same way. If you decide that you want something that's more than basic or is easier for a user, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of distributions of Linux. So the process of deciding how to do that will be in one of my future presentations, an extension of this one. But again, the basic recommendation is pick one that's extremely popular, which Linux Mint is, and download, install it, and try it out. Steve Parker.
Yeah, have you been able to get Linux Mint to run Steam?
Yes.
And does it do it effectively, or?
Does it do it is the first part of your question. Yes. Does it do it effectively? Well, yes, but I
tried the Bazite version
Yeah.
of Linux, and I got the darn thing to install, but I couldn't get it to run.
Gaming has been one of the sore points that many users, especially technical users, have complained about with Linux itself. The company Steam has a whole bunch of online games, as well as those that can run entirely on your computer. And they're in development of their own operating system, which is based on Linux. They're calling it Steam OS. And it's still not out, not even in beta, but their team is still working on it. But Steam is available for installation under Linux, Mac, and Windows. And when it's installed on Linux, there is an add-on called Proton, not the Proton Mail, which loads with it. And it also installs a number of Windows DLLs. So it's a combination of Linux calling DLL routines. And yes, it does work. Some of the more simple games work. Some of the more complex games, not as well. But there's whole gamer forums out there, Discords especially, that are devoted to running gaming under Linux. So it's there, but I will be honest with you, my old desktop or my old tower unit, which I was going to dispose of, I'm still keeping running Windows 10 and running my Steam game on, just because it's got a very good graphics card on it and it runs pretty well. I know Drew was looking at buying a mini computer that has an adapter that runs an external graphics card. Drew, did you get any further in your investigations of that?
No, actually, I owned the purchase for a few months while I work on some other projects. So it's been on the back burner for now. I'm not a really big gamer or a gamer at all, so it would be unlikely that I would try and run Steam or any other graphics game program on there, just because I don't do it now.
Okay.
I'm not a good gaming resource.
Well, I might give you a project just to try once you get it, just to see if it works, to see if that's something I want to do and get rid of my old tower. But
Right.
at the moment, it fills up a lot of discretionary time. Okay, let's see. All right, so advantages of Linux over Windows. A lot of these will probably be subjective, and they claim enhanced security. Well, enhanced security, how? Home users are probably not the largest group of computer users running Linux. Linux runs on a lot of corporate systems, runs on servers, runs on workstations, and there's more options for a hacker to try to get into a corporate Linux system than just trying to pick on a user, get them to click on a link and then install some malware. So Linux itself, pretty much like Chrome, which by the way, the Chrome OS actually is a branch or a fork of Linux. So somebody buying a Chromebook is actually running Linux. But at any rate, the security of the home users type PC, be it a desktop or be it a notebook, is much more enhanced, in my opinion, than the default security for Windows. And that's up for debate. Customization, as I stated, you can customize based on the distribution itself. You can also customize based on how the desktop is set up. And there are actually downloads for separate desktop systems for a Linux distribution. So for example, Linux Mint can come with what's known as the Cinnamon desktop, which is what you just saw. It also comes with Mate desktop, which is a little bit different, with the standard icons and mouse pointers and all the rest of that being different. So people can experiment and see what they like. They're stating that many distributions utilize fewer system resources. So here's where that old computer that's running slow that you're thinking about getting rid of, so that you can buy the new computer, which has Windows 11, restore your speed or be faster, might run just fine under Linux. And the easiest way to find out is you just make an installation disk called a live distribution, or an installation USB flash drive, boot it up on that old computer that has Windows. Don't install it and play with it. It's a full version of Linux. It's running off, it's booting and running off of that USB drive. I recommend that you get a USB 3 minimum just to have the faster interface. But it's a chance to look at it, try it out and see, yeah, maybe it would be worth trying this to save this. And some people will go ahead and get a new PC anyway, and then keep the old laptop and say, okay, now I can use it and do all the things I was doing before. And as in my case, I chose to install Linux instead of Windows right from the start with the B-Link mini computer, because I have used Linux 15, 20 years and retained a very old notebook which runs just fine with it and has minimal CPU, minimal memory. And it just lets me do email and watch YouTube videos and some other things. And then I have a relatively new notebook that I just started out with Linux as well. So as Windows 10 support ends, users do have various options. Keeping Windows 10 with potential workarounds for security, upgrading Windows 11 if possible, or using patches or utilities, purchasing new hardware, considering Chromebooks for simple tasks, or tasks that might not be that simple, but that don't have, major demands on the resources of the computer. Or switching to Linux for a flexible open source solution and running it on a newer, higher powered computer. But Linux is free in the vast majority of cases. And each option comes with its own benefits and drawbacks. So it's up to the user to decide, is this something that they want to do? Now, I did not add in here, use a tablet or use a phone. And some people are quite happy with just computing on a tablet or using their phone for the internet and email. I know several of my relatives and friends that don't even have a computer at all. And they're quite happy doing what they're doing. So you kind of have to decide. I focused in on a PC and trying to keep it going. Now, when I started out to do this series, I was going to kind of do it in two parts. The first part is what I just did today, and I can see that it's gone about 45 minutes. So that's pretty much all I want to try to cover today. But the actual process of how do you go about researching what's required to go to an alternative solution like Linux, choosing the distribution, and we'll take a look at a bunch of distributions that are available, and then actually setting the computer's BIOS, because the vast majority, if not all computers that are sold today are set up to run Windows. And many Linux distributions will adjust for that to try to install and accommodate a newer computer's BIOS. But I wanted my BIOS set up that would definitely support Linux and not have the restrictions of having to have extra security on boot and so on. Downloading Linux using a flash drive with Rufus to set it up, installing it, and checking out Mint that I talked about. Once it's installed, take a look at the applications that come by default with Linux, which pretty much like a Chromebook are going to have you up and running and productive before you've even downloaded the first piece of software. But after that's done, there might be programs that you were running under Windows that now you want to know, are there Linux programs that will do the same thing? And how to do that. And then which Linux programs will actually run, which Windows programs will actually run under Linux. As I said, I've got Quicken, which is a Windows-only program. Which is a Windows-only program. There is no Linux version. And I've got it running. And I had to pay a little bit for a program called Crossover, which some Mac users may be familiar with. And then for those that really say, well, I really want the ability, if I need to run Windows without having to set up what's called a dual boot computer. And this has been done several times with the APCUG workshops and safaris in setting up a Windows virtual machine. And I've done that as well. So that's a good subject on its own, just to show you the capabilities. And you can run Windows 7, you can run Windows XP, you can run Windows 10 and or Windows 11 in a virtual machine very easily. I think I mentioned when Huey was giving the presentation that AI can assist in putting presentations together. So this is the credits go to a company called Slides Go, and they're using icons and infographics and images and so on. But if this is something that you're interested in, Slides, just search on Slides Go, and they can actually help you put PowerPoints together with a lot of options. I don't particularly like this one overall, but it was quick and it was easy. And now I'll stop sharing and we'll open up for any questions.
Question.
Yes.
Thinking of converting a lower end, older Dell computer that I use for a college course. This might be the perfect thing for it because it won't run Windows 11. I don't use Zoom on it a lot, but how does Zoom work in comparison to the Windows on the Linux? No issues?
I have used, sitting to my left is a side desk at about a 45-degree angle.
Mm-hmm.
I have a 32-inch monitor up here with an HDMI connector that I plug into lots of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Keyboard and mouse that are on a switch. So on the desktop itself is a Dell notebook. I'm going to say purchased early 2000-ish. And it came with Windows 7. And I just have never updated it to anything other than Linux. I tried. In fact, we ran a Linux special interest group for a while, and until we got a dedicated computer for it, I used that, and it was in Zoom conferences all the time. I'll probably conference it into the installation portion and do the installations on it as a participation in the conference itself. So
And
Zoom will run.
I assume also that Zoom makes a distribution for Linux itself, you don't have to compile it and all that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a download on the Zoom website.
Very good information. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we thank you all for coming.
Well, we got down to one. Now, offhand, does anybody have any questions or comments about what you just saw?
I'd just like to say that switching over to Linux from Windows, which I did during the Windows 8 era, is really not all that difficult. There is a learning curve. And we have a SIG partly because there is that learning curve. APCUG has workshops. So, yeah, if you're willing to work a little on it and willing to do your own troubleshooting, there are resources available that are very helpful, including online resources, which you can ask or you can just search them. I usually just search. The answer is almost always there, unless it's something brand new where something got messed up. But anyway, sticking with the Windows theme, there are some pieces of software that just aren't there, and there are no equivalents. Crossover is good, but not perfect. Just as wine was good and not perfect. So, yeah, you can run most of the things you want. And it's nice to know that Quicken will run.
I think you're going to be hearing more and more each month, and that some things in discussion, some things in videos or articles about those who are on Windows 10 and options they may have with their old equipment and or buying new equipment. I want to break here before I go to the next step, and that is this Thursday night is the Northwest Computer Club meeting with Ed Keating, and a week from tonight is the Linux SIG meeting. And everybody's welcome who can get the announcements. I'm gonna start up this other video. It is from APCUG's recent meeting. Some of you didn't attend, so that's why I'm also doing it. And a lot of people that attended, like myself, thought it was a very good presentation regarding the general topic of backing up. And it clarified for a lot of people some mysteries and misunderstandings.
To APCUG's Wednesday workshop, where we get together in the middle of the week to learn more about technology. It's March. March is the month of backup. You're going to hear that from us week after week after week until we get to the last day of March. March 31st is going to be, or is, National Backup Day. And that's the day that we get everybody to do their backup. So we're going to give you a number of weeks of workshops and then hope that you do that. Today, we're really happy to have with us Chris Taylor, who's the president of the Ottawa PC User Group. He worked for the Canadian federal government for over 36 years in user and server support, IT infrastructure, and IT security. Chris has been active in community user groups for over 45 years. He co-hosts the very popular weekly Q&A sessions hosted by OPCUG. Chris has given over 540 presentations at the Ottawa Public Library on computer and camera-related topics. He has presented to 5 APCUG member groups and will give another 7 presentations this year. One of them is to my group next month. He has written articles for Glasswire Cybersecurity News and was on the community review board for the Sans Ouch Security newsletter. Today, Chris is going to kick off our month of backing up with talking about effective strategies for keeping your computer files safe. So I'll turn things over to Chris.
Thanks very much, John. I'm pasting into the chat. This will be going out to everybody who is on the call, the PDF of the deck, but if you don't want to wait for it to come to you through email, I did paste into the chat window a URL where you can pick up the deck that I'm going to be presenting today, and also my email address if you want to contact me for any reason. I will say before I bring up my deck, I am a Windows guy, and so the focus of the presentation is definitely going to be on Windows. There's some stuff that is cloud-based, which is irrespective of operating system, but I think it's important that everybody consider the capabilities that I'm going to be talking about, regardless of what your operating system is. So as I go through the presentation, if you think that a certain backup strategy makes sense to you, even if you're not a Windows user, I'm sure that there's a way that you can implement that within the operating system of your choice. So with that, I will bring up my share. Okay, so yeah, the title on this is We'll Backup Effective Strategies for Keeping Your Computer Files Safe. And what I'm going to be going through is, first off, why backup? Most of the people on this call, it shouldn't be a big surprise there, but maybe there's some nuances that some people might not have thought about. Then we'll look at different approaches to actually doing your backups. And then I have some other considerations about offsite backups, how many backups people should think about, and a few other smattering of additional information. I will say that the PDF also includes some additional slides that I'm not going to be able to get around to presenting on today. So by all means, you might want to look at the full deck. So axiom number 1, there's 2 kinds of people in the world: those who've lost data and those who will lose data. And this is pretty much a given, that pretty much everybody who uses computers for any period of time is going to end up losing data. Axiom number 2 is data that is in only one place is at risk of loss. If you lose that one file, you may not be able to recover that data except by recreating from scratch. Data loss can happen a lot of different ways. So you can have physical destruction of or hard disk failure. You can have an electrical problem, a surge that takes out your computer, including all the data on your hard drive. Could have a virus, could have a fire, could have a theft. You could accidentally delete or modify data. Oh, I just suddenly realized here, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to reshare because I have to enable audio and I forgot to do that. So let me do the reshare and share sound. My apologies on that. So you could accidentally delete a file or modify data and save it to disk, overwriting the original, or various ways like that. Now I'm going to show you a short video that is from a photographer based in Oregon. This is a guy who understands technology well, has good backup processes, and is going to talk about how this can actually occur to anybody where you can lose data, even those who are very experienced. Oops. And why did that not come up? There we go. Okay.
But what I did, I was actually formatting a smaller hard drive, and I was multitasking and wrapping presents, and we had the whole holiday season happening and people visiting and kids sick and lack of sleep, and I clicked the wrong hard drive and I formatted my big Drobo. I formatted 18 terabytes of data, all my videos, these kinds of videos that I do, instructionals, videos from the field of epic things that I see with wildlife or landscapes and light, time lapse, photos, you name it, 17 terabytes. I formatted it. And when I tried to do a recovery, a lot of it was corrupted. So fortunately, I had the second Drobo with all the data. And right now you can see I'm moving my file with all my images that are in my library back across from one Drobo to the other. It's a little slow flowing through the computer and out from one through the processor and back to the other. It's going to take about 17 hours to move 10 terabytes essentially of photo data. But all that stuff's localized here. If it had been a complete crash, I could always go into Backblaze and request them to mail me hard drives with all that data. I'd have to pay a hefty deposit, which would be returnable once I send the drives back, but at least it's an insurance policy for total loss. And, you know, my own stupid fault here, hitting the wrong button, not paying close enough attention, moving, multitasking in a way that I'm not great at, particularly when sleep deprived, but it just goes to show it can happen to anybody, so make sure you're backing up your data, preferably both locally and in the cloud.
So, yeah, it's very important. It can happen to anybody. That's really important note on that. So, when you're going to back up stuff, you have to have a place that you're going to back it up to. And so I list out here a few locations that you might be able to back up data to. You can have an internal hard drive on your computer. You could have either an SD card or a flash drive, or you could have an external hard drive. And you can see here the cost per gigabytes. The first and the last one are the cheapest ones by far in terms of cost per gigabyte. The only reason why I actually list SD card and flash drives is they can be used in a limited fashion to back up a limited amount of data, and you may have some lying around that you can use basically for free. But the best one by far is the external hard drive, and the reason is it gives you the large capacity, low cost per gigabyte, and you can separate it from your computer. So that provides you protection from things like the fire and theft and electrical surges and things like that. So I highly recommend that you concentrate on external hard drives as your primary means of backup. So what is actually on your computer? You have your operating system. In my case, it's Windows, but it could be Linux or Mac OS or whatever. You have your programs that you've installed on top of the operating system, and then you have your data. And the data icon I think of as anything that you create on your computer. So why backup? Well, if your computer dies, you can buy a new one, no problem with that. Your operating system gets corrupted, no problem, you can reinstall it. It's your documents, your pictures, your videos, things like that, the information that you create that nobody else has copies for. So why not just back up your data? After all, really, it is the only thing that can't be replaced relatively easily. So it can be a solution for sure. Your data is what is critical that nobody else has. Your backups are much smaller and they'll run really quickly if you're just backing up your data because you don't include the operating system and your programs in your backup. But keep in mind that this is not backing up your operating system or your programs, and we'll come back to why that might be important to you. So if you do a manual data backup, you can just copy all your important files either to an external hard drive, flash drive, cloud storage, anywhere else off your computer. But it's a tedious process, so it's easy to forget it, to do it, and it's easy to miss some important files that are on your computer. If you just back up your data, think about whether you're backing up all your data. This is an example. I use Thunderbird for my email, and so it brings down all of the email off the email server and stores it locally, and this is where it actually stores it. And let me just... If you look here, it's under this PC, my Windows drive, drive C, users, CTailer, and app data that happens to be a hidden folder, roaming, Thunderbird, profiles, some random name that is generated by Thunderbird when I set up the profile, and then finally the mail folder. This is where my photo editor stores its catalog. And again, it's under that folder for app data, which is a hidden folder, roaming on one photo raw 2025 photo settings cache. So that's where the catalog is for my photo editor. All of the edits to all of my photos are stored in that. If I was to lose that catalog and I didn't have a backup of it, I would lose all the edits that I've done over years to my photos. Now, would anybody think that when they're backing up their data, that maybe there's some important places other than just documents, pictures, other of the areas that are set aside automatically by Windows for storing data? Would you think to look to these other locations when you're looking for important data that needs to be backed up? I think a lot of people wouldn't think of that. Okay, so you can have an automated data backup, which this overcomes the manual process where it's easy to forget. So you can configure a program to actually do your backups for you and let the computer do it. Some additional potential benefits that come from automating backups is you can get real-time backup where files are actually backed up as they are created or modified on your computer with very little delay. And you may be able to get file versioning where as you modify a file over time, every version gets saved as a separate entity that you can actually recover. So how does real-time backup work? So I'm working on my computer here, and I save a file to my computer, in this case a Word document file, and you have a program that is actually monitoring for new or changed files, and it'll automatically copy that file to the backup drive as soon as it notices as a new file or a changed file. File versioning works every time a file gets saved, a unique copy gets saved, and you can recover any of those versions of the file. So here I have a document called budget.doc. It gets copied to the backup drive, but it doesn't get copied just as budget.doc. It gets copied as budget.doc and a timestamp that is part of the file name itself. The next time I save the file, it'll get copied with a new timestamp. The next time, and so forth. So every time you save a copy of that document, it gets saved onto the backup drive under a unique name so you can recover any one of those files. So I'm going to talk about in Windows how you can do real-time backup and file versioning with a program that's included with Windows called File History. It's built into Windows 10 and 11. It is somewhat lobotomized in Windows 11. Microsoft is making it difficult to use the program, and I'll have more information about that a little bit later in the presentation. It supports almost real-time backup. It can be as frequently as every 10 minutes that it looks for new and changed files. And it supports file versioning, so every time you save the file, you do get that unique copy saved that you can recover any one of the versions of the files. It's folder-based rather than file-based. So you specify a folder to be backed up, and it will back up all of the files and folders within that folder are automatically backed up. So some of the defaults, it'll do most of the folders underneath your profile in Windows, which is things like documents, pictures, videos, desktop, things like that. Backs up new or changed files every hour, and it keeps versions forever or until you run out of space on your backup drive. Some of the customizations you can do, you can add or remove folders. So if you have things other than under your profile that you want backed up, say you have a data drive that is separate from your operating system drive and you want to back up folders on that, no problem. In terms of frequency, you can change it anywhere from every 10 minutes to daily. And then in terms of how long the versions get kept, you can have until space is required, where it'll automatically clean up old versions to make room for new, or you can have it specified periods of time up to 2 years in length. So the initial setup, I'm going to take you through a pretty rapid look at how you actually configure file history in Windows. So you plug in the external disk drive you want to use for storing the backups, and then you run the Settings app. You go under Update and Security Backup, and you can see on the right-hand side, it's pretty blasé. All you can do basically at that point is add a drive. So basically you're going to tell the program file history where it is you want your backups to be saved. So you click on that and it will come up with a list of available drives that you can use for file history. Notice that the C drive is not on the list, so you cannot back up to the operating system drive. In this case here, I'm picking up a drive Z, and it's basically empty. It's a 1 terabyte drive and it's empty. You can use a drive with existing data on it. There's no problem with that. Once you do that, it is working with its default settings. Now, I highly recommend that if you set it up, come into the more options, because you probably want to customize at least some aspects of the way that file history works. So here's the screen that'll come up, and you can choose things like back up the frequency. And so you can choose anywhere from every 10 minutes up to daily. And you can see that highlighted in red is what the default is, every hour. How long you want to keep your backups. These are the versions of files. And you can see that forever is the default. And you can do it everything from until space is needed, or some discrete values for length of time. I highly recommend that if you're not using the drive for anything else, until space is needed is really the most useful, because it will keep the maximum number of versions of files that you can possibly have. And then if it runs out of space, it'll automatically in the background remove older versions of files to make room for new stuff. You can add a new folder. Again, if you have something that you want to back up that is not one of the default folders, you can specify it there. And then you can actually go in and you can remove files or folders if you don't want them. So in this case, you could right click on music, or what I right clicked on was actually saved games, and then I have the option to remove that from the backup. It'll no longer look to backup files in that particular folder. You can exclude a folder. This is useful because it backs up a folder and all subfolders. If you have a subfolder of a backed up folder that you don't want, you can actually exclude that as a subfolder. If you want to stop using file history, don't just unplug the drive and continue on your merry way. After about a week or so, file history will start complaining that it hasn't seen the backup drive for a while, and it'll implore you to plug in the drive. So if you want to stop using file history, come into the configuration here and click on the stop using drive. It won't remove all of the backup files from the backup drive if you do that. So you can still actually go in and manually access files that are on there, but it will stop adding new backups to that drive. If you want to recover an old version of a file, all you have to do is right click on it and choose properties. So in this case here, I have backup strategies PowerPoint file. I right clicked on it and I choose properties, and then there's a previous versions tab. And you can see here I have a huge number of backup copies of this file from different date and times that I actually saved that file. So I just choose the one that I particularly want. I can choose restore, which will restore it to its original location, overwriting the version that is there at that point in time. Or I can choose restore to if I want to restore it to a different location, and that will keep the current copy of the file, so I could compare between the two of them or whatever I needed to do. What if you're recovering a deleted file? So actually, if I go back here a little bit, here, I say that I right-click on a file and I choose properties. Well, what if I've deleted a file accidentally? So I have nothing to right-click on. In that case, you go to the folder where the file used to be, and on the Home tab in File Explorer, I click on History, and it'll come up with an interface where I can use a rewind and forward and controls to go back through until I get back to where the file actually existed, and then I'm able to restore the file. Notice that there's no restore to, because there's nothing it's going to overwrite, so there's no danger of losing data. It'll just restore it back to its original location. Especially if you have the settings set to keep files forever, which is the default. eventually you will run out of space on that backup drive. So you're going to have to manually go in and tell it that you need to clean up some of those older versions. So to do that, you go into the configuration options, you go to the advanced settings, go to clean up versions, and then you choose the period that you want to actually clean up from. And it will keep everything more recent than that. So it'll clean up, in this case, any old versions of files that are older than 1 year. And then that'll clean that up, allow you to get that extra space to continue on backups. So file history in Windows 11. This is a little bit of a bad story. So Microsoft removed file history from the settings app in Windows. The only way you can configure it now in Windows 11 is through Control Panel, which is an older way of
Chris, I need you to unmute. I was trying to let somebody in.
Okay.
Somebody else did it and overrid. So
Okay.
back up.
I was hoping I wasn't muted this whole time. Okay, so one of the problems with configuring file history in Control Panel is that it only backs up desktop, contacts, favorites, and libraries. So you can't arbitrarily add different folders on your computer. But libraries are special. So libraries are collections of locations of files on your computer. The default libraries are documents, music, pictures, and videos. You can't add new folders, but what you can do is add folders to a library, or you can even create a new library and then add folders to that library. So a little bit laborious to set it up, but once it's set up, you don't have to worry about it again. Second problem, the ribbon got removed from File Explorer at some point in Windows 11, and the ribbon was actually required to access file history for recovering deleted files. So the workaround on that is to go into the Settings app, in the search box, type in file history, and it will come up in the results panel for that, restore your files with file history. When you click on that, you will get that VCR type control where you can actually browse to find the files that you want to recover. So in this case here, I would just drill down and I find the file that I actually wanted to recover, and then I can restore that particular file. Third problem in file history, and this is a little bit of speculation on my part. So the only reason I can think of that Microsoft would have removed file history from settings is they're planning to remove it completely in the future at some point in time. They are trying to make it awkward for people to actually use it so that people will move on to using something else, which I know Microsoft really would like you to save everything to OneDrive. But they actually went to an effort to remove it from Settings app. So they must have had a reason behind that. Personally, I think it's time to look for a replacement for file history in order to do real-time backups and file versioning. The free and open source free file sync looks pretty good. I've been using it for a number of years now, and I found it to be very flexible. It will do everything that file history can do and a lot more. And it's a little bit more laborious to set it up, but it's not impossible, and certainly is a good solution, good solid solution for anybody who wants real-time backups and file versioning on the computer. Let's talk about cloud backup. So I'll pause just for a second and let everybody think about what is the definition of the cloud. And I think one of the best definitions is someone else's computer. And this has some implications if you think about it. You know, it is not something that is owned by you. You do not control that particular device. And that has some important things you have to consider about it. So cloud backup can be a backup solution for sure, because it's your data files that are what is critical. And so you can back up all your data if you have enough cloud storage for all your important files, or you're willing to pay for beyond what you can get for free in cloud storage. Keep in mind it doesn't back up your operating system or your programs. Some of the benefits of cloud backup, though, are you get off-site. So that is your protection against fire, theft, and those localized dangers that your data is exposed to. You can access your backups from anywhere in the world as long as you can get an internet connection. On some backup solutions in the cloud, you'll get synchronization between computers. So that can be a good thing and a bad thing. If you corrupt a file or you have file encrypting malware hits your computer, it will happily synchronize those changes between all your computers. But you can get real-time backup, and you can get sharing files with other people. And those ones that are asterisk are some cloud backup solutions, such as Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive. There's a whole bunch of them. Will provide you with those capabilities, but not all free cloud backup will provide you with those capabilities. So cloud backup works, but what if they go out of business? Now, I don't have an awful lot of worry about Google Drive disappearing one day or OneDrive from Microsoft, but what about Dropbox? I don't know anything about that company. How solvent are they? Are they going to just go out of business one day and then all my files that are on their servers disappear? So what's the mitigation? Nothing unique should get stored in the cloud. Any cloud storage, nothing unique stored there. So that I always have a copy somewhere else, most likely on my local computer or a local backup. What if it gets hacked? Now, I think that Google is probably going to be doing a better security job than I could ever do, but it has not been unheard of that they have security issues. And they're certainly a big target. The hackers know that if they can hack into Google Drive or OneDrive from Microsoft, they can get a treasure trove of tons and tons of files from people from all over the world. And this was a security alert that came out from Google in February 2020, where they explained that some videos in Google Photos were incorrectly exported to unrelated users' archives. Not a good thing. So if I had sensitive data that actually got stored onto somebody else's archive and they got access to it, I don't know who it was, but might they have nefarious purposes with my data? I don't know. So what's the mitigation? Encrypt sensitive data. Anything that you store in the cloud, I highly recommend that if it's sensitive data, encrypt it before it gets stored in the cloud. What about speed and performance? So this was a number of years ago. I was on cable modem with 5 megabit per second upload, 30 megabit per second download, and I had a 300 gigabyte per month cap. So to back up 1 terabyte worth of data would have taken 20 days. To restore 1 terabyte would have only taken 3.5 days. And I would have blown my monthly cap, and I would have been paying extra to have the additional data going over the wires for my ISP. So what's the mitigation for that? Don't back up everything. Okay, just back up what's most important. But what about those other files? Just because it's not your most critical data doesn't mean it's not important. You still want to back it up, but you have to deal with it in a different fashion maybe. So some of the free cloud backup providers, Google Drive is one of the best, I think, in that it gives you 15 gigabytes for free. I use about 8 gigabytes, and I store an awful lot of stuff of my important files that are on Google Drive. You can buy additional space for sure, and they'll give you about 200 gigabytes free or paid for Canadian $48 a year for any additional space. One thing I'd like to mention here too is you can have as many Google accounts as you want. So Google will not prevent you from having half a dozen Google Drives if you want, each one of them with 15 gigabytes free. There are a lot of other ones out there. So OneDrive from Microsoft, Dropbox, and so forth. So there's a lot of free cloud providers out there. So how does it work? So, if you want to synchronize files between multiple computers, which I do all the time, this is very easy to do. So I do this for when I give presentations at the Ottawa Public Library. I carry a laptop computer with me, and it is automatically synced all my files for my presentations between my desktop computer and my laptop computer. If I make a change while I'm at one of the presentations and save it, by the time I get home, the updated presentation has automatically been synchronized back to my desktop computer. As I modify files on my desktop computer, the next time I bring up my laptop computer, it'll automatically synchronize those changes to those other computers. I find it really, really handy to have that automatic synchronization between multiple computers. So I can have important documents or various files that are in the cloud, and they will be accessible through any internet computer, internet connected computer. So here I have Word document and my passport. And then if I connect to that from another computer anywhere in the world, I can access those documents directly. So how do I use it? If I'm traveling, I might have plane reservations and car reservations and hotel reservations stored in the cloud so that I can access that data from anywhere. If I'm going on a cruise, I might have deck plans. I might have the excursions that are offered on the ship all into the cloud as well, where I can access those documents. Notice that I had my passport in there, sensitive data, so that would be encrypted. The other stuff, probably not all that sensitive, so I wouldn't worry about encrypting it. I can share files with other people through the cloud. So I can have it a one-way share where they can just download and view information, or I can actually set it up with two-way share. So I can do collaborative work where I can give access to people where they can modify the files. It'll get synchronized up to the cloud and then get synchronized back down to my computer. There are commercial cloud backup providers. There's an awful lot of them out there. Backblaze was one of the ones that Hudson Henry in the video clip that I showed, he uses. And it's one of the most popular out there right now. There's other ones, Carbonite, iDrive, and so forth. So most of them will give you more than just raw storage. They know the free options exist for that. So they'll give you tools for automated backup, backing up using a ship drive, which is also one of the things that Hudson Henry talked about, where if he had terabytes and terabytes of data, they'll actually ship him drives with his data rather than have to download all of that recover it over the internet, and then he would just return the ship drives and get his deposit backs. Synchronization and things like that. So a lot of the commercial cloud backup providers will do an awful lot to make it easier for you to use it as a backup solution. Usually I find most of them, they're looking to get about US $70 a year or more out of people in order to use the services. The capabilities vary wildly between one commercial cloud backup provider and another. Some of them will give you unlimited data for a single device. Some of them will give you a limited amount of data for multiple devices and so forth. So look at the terms and conditions when you're choosing a commercial cloud backup provider. Okay, let's look back and say, well, why not just back up the data to internal or external hard drives, flash drives, or the cloud? Let's see what happens if you have a disaster. So you have a hard drive failure. What do? You have to replace the hard drive. Then you have to reinstall Windows or your operating system of choice. You have to reinstall all your programs. And then maybe about a week later, you're ready to recover your data files from your backup. It can be a really tedious process. It's not impossible, but it can be a really tedious process to get all of that back up and running before you can use your computer and accessing your data. And then keep in mind, did you back up all your data? Remember, this is where my photo editor stores its catalog with the edits on all my photos for the last years. And if I did not think about backing up that, I would be rather upset with myself that I didn't have a backup copy of all of my photo edits. So how do we tackle that? Backing up everything and use what is known as imaging. And I will note at the bottom of the slide there are additional slides in the downloadable PDF file that give you instructions on locking down external storage devices to a specific drive letter. I highly recommend people do that if they're backing up with imaging. So how does a disk image work? It's a snapshot of everything that's on your computer. So it'll be your operating system, your programs, and your data, all of it copied to an external hard drive. So how do you do disaster recovery with imaging? Well, you have your hard drive failure again. Well, you still have to replace the hard drive. But then rather than installing the operating system, the programs, and recovering the data, what you do is you boot your computer from either a flash drive or a DVD that is enabled through the backup program that you choose. And then you boot your computer from that, you run a recovery program, and a couple of hours later, everything gets restored onto your computer. Your operating system, your programs, and your data. So I wrote an article a number of years ago on free options for imaging. And so if you're interested in seeing what was my criteria that I was looking for in a backup program, and how I looked at a number of programs and how each of them fulfilled those particular requirements for me. What might be of interest to you in that article is whether it matches with the requirements that you have. It might be different. And so you really have to look at what your requirements are when you're choosing a backup program. So if you're imaging your entire computer, some of the capabilities that you typically will get, full and incremental backups. So full will back up everything, but because that's huge and takes a long time to do, they also have incremental, where it'll only back up changes since the last time the backup ran. You get scheduling, where it can automatically run on your computer on a schedule that suits your needs. You get the disaster recovery, to be able to recover everything on the entire computer with using either that bootable flash drive or a DVD that the program lets you create. Or you can just do file and folder recovery if you don't want to recover absolutely everything. I'll show some examples. I'm just going to breeze through this just to show you how easy it is really to use. So the examples I have here are ease us to do backup. And so when you go into the program, you click on the add backup. You get a new job created, and you can click to rename the job to something you want. Then you choose what is it you want to back up. Most people, it'll be disk. And then it'll bring up a list of all of the disks that are on your computer. You can just select all of the drives that are built into your computer. Click on OK. And then you select where you want the backups to be stored. And then you say where you want it to be stored. So you can use EaseUS Cloud. You can actually use some cloud storage that is provided by that vendor, or network attached storage, or a security zone. Most people, it'll be just local drive. And then you just select on a local drive where you want your backups to be stored. You click on OK. And then there is an options dialog box that you can go into where you can configure a whole raft of things on how the backups actually get handled. The defaults I find are pretty good, but one of the ones you might want to come on to is the backup scheme. And there's where you can actually set up a schedule. So you can have it back it up daily, weekly, whatever. And then you click on start the backup. And that's basically it. So if you want to do a recovery, you select your backup job. In this case, I had a backup job called SSD and D exceptions. And then I click on recover. And then I can choose whether I want to recover entire disks or partitions, or do I want to just recover individual files and folders. And if I run multiple backups, I'll have version history, so I'll have the full backup as well as any of the incrementals. I can choose a particular date that I want to recover from. Under the tools, create emergency disk is where I actually create that emergency flash drive or DVD that allows me to recover in an event of a disaster. So you can choose the location for it. For the emergency disk, either a flash drive or a DVD. I recommend you be really careful when you create a flash drive as your emergency disk. You don't want to accidentally select the wrong device, such as your backup disk, because it's going to wipe out all of the data that's on it and turn it into a recovery drive. So this overview really covers the basics. There's an awful lot that can be configured. Highly recommend that you read the manuals. I've read the manuals on a couple of the imaging software that is out there, and they all seem to be pretty clear. They'll really take you step by step through the process and explain all of the options so you can decide what options make sense to you. So there are some problems with imaging. So a month of my backup, this goes back a little while ago. I'm now up to over a terabyte on a full backup, but this is back a while ago. A month of my backups, I had the full backup was 713 gigabytes, and then 30 days of incremental backups was only 123 gigabytes total. So for that full month, 836 gigabytes of space was required on the backup drive for the backups. So that's a considerable amount of space. So what's the mitigation? Well, external hard drives aren't really that expensive. So, here in Canada, we can get a 4 terabyte drive for about $115. And the other thing that mitigates that is that the incremental backups are relatively small. Another problem with imaging, full image backups can take a long time. Mine right now, it's about 2.5 hours to do a full backup. Mitigations to that, well, the incremental backups that run for me every day, they usually run in under 5 minutes. And then you can also schedule backups to run unattended. So I have mine run at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so even when it cycles through and wants to run another full backup, do I care if it takes from 1 till 4 o'clock in the morning? Not really. I'm not using my computer, and it'll just run unattended. I think that there's more than one solution is the best way to go about doing it. So backing up just your data is not a bad solution as a part of the solution. So using file history or free file sync gives you near real-time backup as you make changes to your files or as you add changes onto your computer, add files, you'll get those backups immediately. Versioning can give you really long recovery periods so that if you're working on a document and you say, well, I was working on this file for the last few weeks and I really think that I deleted something out of this file 2 weeks ago and I really want to get that back, you're able to get it back really easily. And potentially even years ago, when you had an older version of that file, you can actually recover that particular version that you want. Cloud backup. Some of the benefits of it, accessing it from any computer in the world. I find that to be really, really useful. Sharing files with others rather than have to email files to people makes it really, really handy to be able to take any file and just share a link and then they can download it directly to the computer. Synchronizing between computers can be really, really useful so that if you have multiple devices, you can have the files automatically kept in sync between all your devices. And then that real-time backup I find really useful, as well as file history giving it to you. You can get real-time backup in cloud as well. And then backing up everything. So image backup, and that gives me disaster recovery for the entire computer, which file history and cloud backup will not give me. In addition to be able to recover the entire computer, I can recover individual files and folders, so I don't have to wipe out everything that's on my computer just to do a recovery. Apple Mac OS users. Now, I'm not a Mac user, so this is just something that I'm a little bit jealous about. As I understand it, they have Time Machine, and it automatically will give you hourly backups for the last 24 hours, daily backups for the last month, weekly backups for all previous months, and the oldest are deleted when space is required automatically. And my understanding is you just plug in an external hard drive. The OS will ask you, oh, do you want to use this for Time Machine? You click on yes, and you're done. It just works. You can actually start your computer from Time Machine disks. So if you have complete failure on a hard drive or on a computer, you go out and buy a brand new one, you plug in your old Time Machine disk, it'll recognize that it's a Time Machine disk and ask if you want to restore from that. And if you say yes, a while later, you'll be back up and running with everything you had when you were starting out. Now, when it comes to actually doing recovery other than entire disaster recovery, I have no clue how it's done. So I highly recommend that people take a look at recovery processes as well. Let's talk about a couple of other things. Offsite backup. So this is really important. It mitigates some of the rarer dangers such as fire, theft, and file encrypting malware. Because it's rarer dangers, I don't worry about it being as frequent. So I, for example, do an offsite backup about once a month. So if I have a disaster where I have a fire in my house or a theft where somebody stole the my computer as well as my backup drive, which is constantly attached to it, then I might lose up to a month's worth of work. But I think that that's a rare enough occasion or likelihood that I can live with that to actually have to recover some other way my my data over the last month. Where do you store that backup disk? Well, a desk drawer at work or a friend's house or something like that is a good location. Some people think about putting it into a safety deposit box, but I think that that's probably not the greatest. It's a little bit more awkward to do it. You're not likely to do it as frequently, and you wouldn't want to have to do a recovery on Friday night and have to wait until the bank opens up on Monday morning. Because that drive is going to be stored somewhere else outside of your control, I highly recommend that you encrypt any offsite backups. And so some external drives will include optional full disk encryption. Western Digital drives in particular seem to be very common for that. Seagate, some drives include the option for doing full disk encryption. Some of them don't. Most of the imaging software includes an option to do encryption. So you can actually encrypt the backup job and not worry about doing full disk encryption on the drive itself. One thing of note is file history doesn't easily allow offsite backup. A file history drive really expects to be constantly connected to your computer so that it can do those real-time backups. So how many backups should people have? I think you need backups in at least 3 places. So your main one is on your computers, your working files that you're working on day to day. You want a local backup using either file history or image backups. And that allows you to do it frequently. And certainly in terms of file history, I have it set to every 10 minutes that it's looking for new or changed files. It does provide protection from accidental deletion, disk failure, and so forth. It doesn't provide protection from things like your house burning down or an electrical failure that fries your computer as well as your backup disk, which is connected to it. So for that, you want offsite backup. So you could use that cloud or image backups that are stored on an external hard drive that gets stored somewhere else. And that gives you that protection from fire, theft, electrical surging, and so forth. Think about your needs. Choose a solution that's right for you. It's not going to be the same solution that's right for me. So think about how frequently you need to back up. My girlfriend backs up her computer once a week. Now, I've warned her that if a failure happens, she can lose up to a week's worth of her changes on her computer. She has decided that she's willing to live with that, and that's her choice. Me, I'm not willing to live with a chance of losing data that is a week old. So I do backups every day, as well as incremental backups of my important files to both the cloud as well as to file history drive connected to my computer. Test your backup processes. We don't back up for backup's sake. We back up so we can recover. So verify that you can actually recover your files. Now, I don't suggest that you actually blow away your drive C on a Windows computer to verify that you can actually recover from a backup. But you might want to actually back up, or try to do a recovery of an individual file, for example. So verify that you can recover at least files and folders on your computer, and more or less trust that you can back up entire partitions. If you have the ability to see if you can recover entire partitions, all the better, but at least verify that you can recover files and folders. So on your image backup solutions, make sure you create that emergency recovery disk and flash drive and test that you can actually boot from that. I had a process that I thought was a good process for backup, and I had never actually tried booting from the recovery media. I tried one time after having a failure, and I all of a sudden discovered that I was not able to access my backup drive while I was booted from the recovery media. Now, I got around it because that particular recovery software allowed me to access recovery drive or a backup drive that was attached to another computer over the network. And so I was able to put my backup drive on my son's computer and then access it over the network. And it took a little bit longer, but it was actually recoverable. But that taught me an important lesson to make sure that I can actually recover from that bootable drive, at least recovering some individual files and folders. So I think there are 3 important strategies that everybody should really consider. One is make sure you back up. 2, make sure you back up. 3, make sure you back up. Just for anybody who's interested in the Auto PCs group, before I take questions and things like that, we do have monthly meetings that are open to members and non-members. We welcome guests at any time. Links to the Zoom meetings are on our website. The main meeting is on the second Wednesday of the month. So this evening we're having a presentation on smartphone apps. And on other Wednesday evenings, we have a Q&A session for an hour. Everybody is welcome. If you want to join the Ottawa PC User Group, it's only $20 a year, and that's Canadian dollars. And if you join before the end of the month, you'll get 2 years for the price of one. We have a lot of resources that are available, most of which are available to anybody, including anybody who comes across it on our website. We do have a couple of member-only services that are available as well. Some additional material in the downloadable PDF file, locking an external drive to a single drive letter. That's actually important because if you, as you remove and add drives onto a Windows computer, it can, in certain circumstances, end up changing drive letter that gets assigned to it. If you do this with your backup drive, and your backup program is set to, for example, back up your files to drive D, and then all of a sudden it becomes drive E, it's not going to be able to save your backups to it correctly. So it's really important to lock down your external drive that you use for backup to a single drive letter. I have more information in there about using file history in Windows 11 and the workarounds that I mentioned in the slide, going into a little bit more detail. And then I talk at length in the additional slides on using Free File Sync as a replacement for file history, how to set that up in order to get you all of the capabilities that file history gives you. And that's all, folks. So I did paste it in the chat, but you can do a screen cap right now if you wanted to pick up that PDF file rather than waiting for it to be delivered to you by Judy at some point. And with that, I would like to open it up for any questions.
Okay, I stopped.
That was great. Couldn't ask for a better beginning workshop to overview backup for this whole month.
Okay, I stopped this at the moment. This is mostly Q&A, but there's a lot of good tips and suggestions, etc., in that part of the presentation. This whole thing edited down is still about an hour and 20 minutes. So it's got about, oh, wait a minute, I take that back. It's an hour and 22 minutes, and we're at 54 minutes 38 seconds into it. I don't know that anybody wants to stay up for this. These videos are on my Google Drive that I use to share videos with Sanford. I don't know how long I'll leave them up there, but you'll be able to get these 2 individual videos One of them also has a PDF with it. The information he's referring to here, I will not get that until probably early next week. It takes about 10 days or so. And the video itself to the public on YouTube, it won't occur until around the middle of April. So you're getting a preview because I record it. If we had our meeting next Tuesday, I could have played their official version for those who attended the meeting. And I'd also have their handout material. I've got one other comment myself. I think it applies to all OSs, but I'm sure it's different in each one to one degree or another. But some of the backup programs, especially in imaging, and one of the two of the formats are IMG and one is ISO. Those are in Windows and probably most of the other OSs mountable as a drive that should allow you to copy out copies of files and or folders if you want to recover individual stuff. And this is part of the reason why I do not subscribe to paying for the versions that allow me to do incremental differential backups. But at the same time too, I'm not backing up my data on a regular basis other than the full image backup. I don't usually feel I have a need for versioning, and if I were to choose one or the other, I'd probably use the differential in most cases versus incremental. As he brings up, if I'm doing incrementals, say just one a day, and I do a full backup once a month, if on the 16th incremental backup it's corrupted, you cannot recover anything from that day or any day after that that you did incremental backups because of how that works. A differential, if it is for any reason corrupted, you only have the one differential file. So all you're going to get back is your image backup from up to a month ago. So those are a couple things everybody needs to understand and keep in mind in how they go about doing their backups. I do know from the west side there was a woman that came in that was creating a book. I think it was for children. Seemed to be a big book to her, and she would be a candidate for both incremental backups and versioning capability, because that way she'd be able to checks back to a prior version, say, oh, I deleted that out, I didn't want to, or I wanted to move it from here to there, so I want to copy this out of here and put it in this location in the current version, or something along those lines. Anybody, and there's only two of you still here, got any further comments or ideas? Boy, you guys are talkative tonight.
Well, one thing that's sort of a plug for Linux about restoration. It's a lot easier to do a rebuild in Linux if you have I made note of your of your software markings because unlike with Windows and well, not really with Mac, but mostly with Windows, you're not getting your software from a wide variety of different sources. You're usually using a common repository. If you use only an app store, you'd have the same thing happening.
Well, another thing too, and this goes back to the first video about Windows 10. There are some programs that can help people go from 10 to 11. One of them is called PC Mover. I think it runs 50
Yep.
bucks, and I believe it is locked to one machine. So if I got 10 machines, I gotta buy 10 copies or something along that lines. They might give you a discount for that kind of volume, but so if you have multiple machines, you got to think about that situation. Another thing, there are alternatives to that, but barring that, uh, the best thing to do is to keep both machines. And you can transfer your data files pretty easily, at least the majority of them. Copy them on media or through your network, share the files and pull them over to the Windows 11 machine. My suggestion though is on programs installed on 10, get new copies. And since you got the old machine, you know what programs there are. But if you look at all the programs that are installed on your 10, how many are you really using? Only download on 11 the ones you're really using. If you use a program, say once a year, like doing your own taxes from one of the tax companies, okay, fine. They're going to give you a new program, but you may want a copy of the old program because I've had one person I know of who needed many years worth of old copies of the tax software along with his tax filings. And the only way to do that is you got to have them backed up somewhere. So these are some general ideas of how to deal with different things. If I really felt I needed to, I'd back up at least some of my data on a probably case by case basis rather than a regular basis. Uh, but other than that, yeah, if I lose it, usually I'm not losing much of anything. So why worry about it? And if I have to restore a whole image backup or go to a whole image backup, mount it, and pull out some files, I can do that. Yes, they're out of date, or some of them are out of date. And anything new I created and or modified since that backup was done, I lose out on that. But I didn't lose everything. I did put into chat the document for you guys. Oops.
Duly noted and downloaded.
Have you got your copy, Dennis?
Yeah.
Duh. At any rate,
Yeah, I downloaded it.
okay.
Feedback.
Well, that's because he's got the Chromebook open and a Linux box open, and
Yeah,
that's
I accidentally opened both.
yeah. Well, at any rate, one other thing about the handout. There's lots and lots of various information in there. Uh, like I said, for that auto backup, I'm waiting for the PDF for that. If I think of it, I'll try and remember to send that out to you guys.
Okay, thanks.
It'll only cost you $100 ahead of time.
Well, I still have to pay my dues, so that'll be 130.
Uh-huh. At any,
I,
ra- at any rate, I don't think anybody wants to continue on with
let me
this.
ask, let me ask one question.
Go
On
ahead.
our previous meeting that we had with Sanford, he said something, and I just want to clarify it with you guys. So I said that I have this one Windows 10 computer that I always do my TurboTax on. And other than connecting to the internet to download TurboTax or update TurboTax or transfer my return to TurboTax, I don't use that computer on the internet. But Sanford said something like, but you still connect it to the internet. So I'm trying to clarify. So am I still open if I turn on my machine, connect it to the internet, and say, yes, connect and download the latest update from TurboTax? Am I in danger of getting hacked right then and there?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Also, when you send your taxes out, if you're looking for any updates that still may be available for that version of Windows, you're vulnerable there too.
Anytime you have an open internet connection, it is a two-way street. Anything can come in.
well, then how can anybody at any time be safe on their computer on their computer? I
By
mean,
keeping everything up to date, using a
okay.
supported operating system, supported software versions, and making sure, very sure, your security is up to date and is something you trust.
If that Windows machine is not currently 10 or 11, you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
Period. That's why after, we'll say November, second Tuesday, after you're not going to get any updates unless you pay Microsoft $30 for the first year, 60 for the second year, and $120 for the third year. Is the last thing I've heard. Therefore, you become vulnerable, very vulnerable, after the second Tuesday in November. Period.
Mhm.
There is no ifs. There is no ands. There is no buts.
Also, don't count on running a virtual machine under Linux to protect you.
That's correct.
Oh,
There are ways. There are ways that tunnels can happen.
yeah. I was curious during the presentation that Tim showed. Um, it just struck me. I don't know why it didn't hit me before, but the guy said, running run under Linux, running some Windows programs in a virtual box.
Yeah, but
Do-
he's probably not doing anything sensitive or anything he really cares much about. And he's also being very careful about Linux. Linux isn't just one thing. There are layers and layers, and you can add layers for security in Linux. In Windows, you don't get that choice. It's either there under Windows 11 or it's not there under previous versions. But in Linux, you can add in things like SE Linux, which is secure environment, or you can add the Grand Unified Firewall. The Windows Firewall already exists and it's configured for you. You can configure the Windows Firewall to be better. And Tim does this. And he has programs that help you do it. So there are various tweaks for security that you can do in every operating system.
Okay. Okay.
Something that you can think of there, Dennis, with the virtualization. What he's talking about is you would have a Linux box, as secure as you can make it. You would then add virtualization software. VirtualBox is one, VMware is another one. KVM is a native Linux version of virtualization. You then make a virtual machine installing Windows 10 or 11. It's better to go with the 11 because that's current. But when you load Windows 10, 11 onto a virtual box, you do still have to have a license for it. Now, you can keep running it without the license, but there's a few things you cannot do changes to uh, in 10 and 11 without the license, and you have a watermark down the bottom left corner that basically says to activate your Windows. Anybody who you happen to have around that sees that watermark may know and understand, oh, you don't have a licensed version of that Windows in that machine.
Okay.
And that can be a point of embarrassment.
And
Yeah.
one other thing this fella probably does, he probably has an enterprise grade hardware firewall in front of his machine. Now,
Okay.
I'm not saying he does, I'm just saying he has a sophisticated enough network that he probably does.
Yeah.
I doubt it. He's a retired person at home in Florida. I doubt he has an internet, I
Okay.
mean, enterprise class. You can
Okay.
get Linux SE and put it on. That really hardens a version of Linux. I've never used it myself.
What,
Uh,
SC Linux is actually a package that can be added over
that's right.
most Linux kernels.
Right. But the other thing is that I'm pretty sure I briefly brought it up at the last Linux meeting. Um, Fire Jail.
Yeah.
It's a unique little addition to a regular firewall to help secure bad things from attacking that machine.
Yeah,
Just the
and
machine.
there's a slightly less capable thing called App Armor, which is
That's
often applied in Linux.
that can be added on as well. These things keep you safer, and if you are really into Linux, you can get into things like Docker and Docker containers, which think of it like operating that application inside of a champagne bottle with the cork on top. And any bad thing that comes in may destroy the content of that bottle, but nothing else. And if you got backups, then all you have to do is blow away that container, create a new container, put that software in that container, and go ahead and continue on from there, I guess. Just don't make the mistake that may have caused the infection in the first place.
Yeah, there are different ways to do virtualization, different ways to uh, create a sandbox or a container or whatever. Browsers get sandboxed, entire operating systems get put in containers or pieces of operating systems, and nowadays applications get put in containers in Linux. That's what those so-called Flatpak and Snap things are.
Okay.
And it's probably the future of Linux because I I want to go into further detail of this during the Linux meeting. I They're pushing things out of the kernel that used to be in the kernel, and higher versions of the kernel no longer contain things like drivers, and it's getting to be quite an annoyance. And I can go into a recent experience of mine with LMDE
Well, I
that
recently had
demonstrates it.
I
They're,
recently,
they're doing that for security purposes,
No.
no,
They're
flexibility.
doing it. You see, the kernel is getting bigger and bigger, and there is this philosophical change between programming languages. They want to get C out, they want to put in Rust. That sort of thing. It just makes for more compact. Rust is more secure, and it is. There are things you can do in Rust that are more efficient than what you're doing in C.
Yeah, coding is easier because Rust is a newer and higher level language than C is. The only downside is how many people who review open source code know Rust that do know C. And another one is what is the generated code efficiency of Rust versus C?
And does anyone have the right to change my C code into Rust code?
Well, that too. But
That
that's,
has been a controversy
yeah,
among the kernel maintainers.
oh yeah.
But they've
It's
got other controversies to deal with.
it's ridiculous in a certain sense. Uh, we all have to go with the flow of change. And
Mhm.
sooner or later, well, it's kind of like going from your X11 display code to Wayland, and then there may be something in the future that we go to from Wayland. Well, doing most of the code in C, there is a lot of code out there that's in Python.
Yeah, Python
And
is okay. It's just there's a lot of programs that are like that.
that's right.
It's actually very transparent and very easy to learn compared with these others.
Yes.
But it's not very efficient.
Well, many of the Pythons are interpretive. It's a pseudo compiled language. They tokenize it, and that's what it's referred to.
Well, anyway, keeping this back down to a beginner's level, it's just virtual machines inside of Linux still have the vulnerabilities of the operating system inside that VM. And the
okay.
same thing is true of containers. Containers do a really good job of containing things. Virtual machines, not quite as good. And if you want to run the operating system itself, don't even think about it.
And because, but see, he brings up a good point here, and so did Mike Ungerman. Mike Ungerman figured out a way of running his
Quicken.
Quicken, which is a Windows only program, in his Linux. Now, hopefully, one of these days he'll tell us how he did it. Uh,
Crossover.
Pardon?
Crossover. Crossover. It costs something like $30
I
for a
thought it was
license.
I thought it was 50,
Might be. Might be up.
but
It used to be 30.
in either case, there's that solution, or you put Windows in a virtual machine on a Linux box, install that software like
Yeah.
TurboTax or something like that in there, do your work from there, and only use it periodically, very sparingly.
Yeah, he's doing that with currently supported versions of Windows so that they're not going to have these vulnerabilities.
Right.
Not so much, anyway. Windows always has vulnerabilities, and so does Linux. But you're doing the best you can if you don't use an unsupported version.
Yeah,
If you're going to use XP because your software only runs under XP, you must understand the risks you are taking on, and you should take additional steps to secure anything that
and,
runs.
and under a virtual box type of image of, say, Windows, you want to keep updating that and all your software like it's a live, normal, bare metal machine. Then in the virtualization, most of them give you what's called snapshot. And that's like a restore point, so that if you have a disaster with the primary machine, you've got a backup that you can restore to full production from the time and day you did the snapshot.
And virtual machine snapshots are really a lot easier and they take up less disk space than if you have the full operating system.
There's tons of stuff that in computers we barely put a tiny scratch on that are possibilities, but you got to have enough curiosity, patience, and perseverance to pursue some of them.
And I would like to mention one thing he said about Chrome OS, which is unique right now, but it's getting into Linux. Other Linuxes are doing it now too. And that is the AB root system. And that means you have two copies of your file system. That is to say, the nuts and bolts parts of it. And one copy is backing up in the background silently, while the other copy is still running. It makes for nice, smooth, stable operation, and then when you reboot, it switches. So now you're running the B version, and the A is going to update.
Well, you don't even, in some cases, have to do the B version. Reboot. What you can do if it's a browser, you just shut down the program. The next time you open it up, it should be live. If you don't have it running 80% of the program in memory in the background. I always
Yeah.
turn that feature off in the settings. That way, I always have to reload the whole browser, and that would automatically bring in the B version,
Yeah.
and that becomes the primary.
The point I'm making is that if you're using the AB root system, you're going to want to have a smaller kernel, and you're going to want to have none of your drivers in there. This gets pushed out into a layer that's called the shell. That's the next layer out. Your web browser is way farther out. It's in your application layer and it's in the internet layer.
If you've ever seen some of the science programs of Earth and all the layers from the surface down to the inner core of Earth, that's the way most operating systems work. You have a kernel at the very core, and everything else comes out as its a priority in keeping a running system. So drivers and certain other features are in the next layer, and eventually you get to the point where you have your applications such as TurboTax or Quicken in the outermost layer that would be like the surface of Earth.
And this is why it's actually easier the farther out you go, the easier it is to isolate or put firewalls or put sandboxes or containers. It's easier to do that if you're farther out. This is one reason they pushed things all the way out onto the web as web apps, because that's very securable. And they can have enterprise grade security. And Chrome OS pretty much does that. It pushes things out into web apps.
Well, another thing that I'll mention here before we call it
Yeah,
a night,
yeah.
uh, it's in relation to you, Dennis. I used to do my own taxes on my machine, like you're talking about, but I'm not sure exactly how many years ago. I'd say maybe 5 years at least. I switched to doing it online through the browser. I'm not saying it's the greatest, latest, but that company you're doing business with has a copy of all your stuff anyhow, especially when you submit it through them to the IRS. They got it. Okay. So, and they all use at least SSL or better security, much like your banks and financial institutions, or they get their chestnuts roasted.
However, I would definitely keep local copies and
Oh,
even
yes.
hard copy.
Oh, yes. That's a mandatory. But even from online, I have the right to. It gives you the option to save a local copy. So I've got my local copy that's required. I have it printed out, and I have a saved digital version.
Yeah, and then print it out.
Yeah.
Well, just trying to understand the online version. When you're doing like TurboTax online, I know they have such a thing. You're logged on to them for could be hours at a time.
Yes.
Isn't
So
that making you more susceptible that way than my method of just connecting for a second and
yeah, it's more than a second, and it only takes a second to get malware of any kind, let alone ransomware.
Malware
yeah.
can have very few lines of code, and it can now get into your firmware, so you would never know what happened, and you might never be able to get rid of it.
And you have to, in those cases like that, guess what? Your whole computer and every component in it is susceptible and therefore suspect to being infected in the firmware, and therefore the only option is to have it sent to a recycle center and make sure that they really trash it rather than try and salvage parts and resell that stuff, because that's
Right.
normal. That's normal business practice. But you destroy it completely, and then you have to go out and get a new machine. And if you have any kind of backups that are safe, then you have to go and take, and you don't know this sometimes until you actually put them back, because you don't know when you got infected. Okay. That's why you got to have multiple uh, sequential backups in your inventory. And that way you would get a new machine, restore the last backup you had, pray that it's not infected. And if it is, you lost another machine probably. And till you can get a version of the backup that isn't infected, it'd be very, very old, but it's better than starting absolutely from scratch.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, the point is don't use an unsupported operating system and don't use tech software that's too old. You can't for several reasons.
Yeah, any software that's getting updated, part of the reason it's getting updated is not just new features or bug fixes, it's also security fixes. And the longer that software is been in use, okay, if you are a person who doesn't update his software, you're giving the bad guys time to figure out in that old version what
Okay.
vulnerabilities there are to break into it and start hacking your system and try and take control of it and get all your personal information and maybe use your computer as a zombie, and the government comes knocking on your door to arrest you, confiscate your computers. You won't see the computers again, even if they're all clean.
Well, in any event, I have to find out what I did with my reading glasses.
Yeah, well, all right. I almost turned that part off, so I've got a copy of that,
Of
this
what?
discussion that we've had here, because
Oh,
it's Linux is brought up in the very first part of the meeting, so
yeah.
I'm leaving this. All right.
I think it's interesting stuff, and I intend to bring up the same thing in the Linux SIG about uh, the changes in the kernel and
Yeah.
what this means for drivers and the difficulty of finding those drivers.
By the way, are you also familiar with the issue with Firefox?
Yeah, people think that maybe they have changed the way they do data collection. But maybe they're just being more explicit about saying what they've always done.
Yeah,
Because
we
all
don't know.
browsers do similar things.
But I posted on the CFCS Discord channel a couple of interesting programs that rate the browsers, 13 of them.
Yeah.
And also some additional information. There's a privacytest.org. You can run that from any browsers you have on your system, and it'll give you some idea how vulnerable is your browser that you're using in privacy.
Yeah. What kind of information is it collecting? What is it sending? And whether or not it might be going to third parties.
Okay. I think we've had enough for the night.
Yeah.
It's past
I think so too.
your bedtime, Bob.
It sure is, especially given what's going on with all this dust.